know. I was being selfish. I didn't want to think. But it's very stressful.
I had just started my nap, 15-minute nap, and then I got an alert saying meeting in 15 minutes, and I said, no, please tell me it's not at 6 o'clock.
And then you're like, oh.
So
Yeah. Trying something different. If more people show up, we'll fill it. If more people show up, we'll fill it. I know it's 6 o'clock. We started today's meeting a little earlier. We're just waiting for the folks to trickle in. So we are gonna get started in the next 5 minutes now. Started.
Oh, hold on. Hold on.
Hold on.
Six attending, one of which I think is Damien, but he didn't have to attend virtually. I didn't recall getting an email from him. I should be only back.
all my hair. Usually I can do 4 hours if I go to the store. great camera, I have to look at it, but like the whole time. I look at this Zoom, it's all gone.
My son and I were talking about,
Yeah.
like, the glare makes certain things look. This is particularly more white, so that often. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Good. Other side. It just looks good. Do you know? Or is like.
Even that's.
Just. Do you want to change it? Or? Not all. We were looking at an ads for by support on the makeup, and all of the different groups and groups all look the small. That's what.
Oh, yeah.
Why?
Hi, everyone. We're gonna go ahead and officially start the meeting with Mo.
Board members. For the board members who are attending online, just wait to get your call, unmute, state present. Antoinette Martinez. Jeremy Kaplan. Sylvia Gusto. Damian Andrade.
Present.
Thank you. You will be marked present, but you do not count towards quorum. Jalila Bailey. Gladys Bruno. Justin Campos. Bridget Coldor. Terry Conti.
I'm here. It's very hard to hear though, just so you know, the sort of transmission to Zoom.
We'll do our best. You are present, but you do not count quorum. Erin Keith. Maria Roca. John Santor. Michael Tom. And Faye Walker.
Here.
Thank you, Faye. You are marked present, but you do not count as quorum. Roll is called.
Hey, hi, everyone. I understand that the transmission to Zoom is not the best. Apologize in advance if hearing what's going on in the room is a little difficult. Looks like we actually have more folks on Zoom than in the room. Was hoping that we would have had a lot more people in person. Since it's our second official meeting, of this year. Our first meeting was actually a hearing about the shelter site. So this is really our first meeting where I was hoping to do a meet and greet and sort of plan for, not the next semester, but for the next couple of months of just planning different workshops that we can work on together as a committee. So we'll do our best to do that together. Really appreciate everyone joining, especially if you're not a member of the housing committee. If you're on the board and interested in being part of this committee officially, we would love to have you. So I'll start off. Really just wanted to do again like a meet and greet. Really want us to build community within this committee so that we can, work to get more workshops and conduct business together. So I'll go ahead and I'll start. My name is Antoinette Martinez. I'm born and raised in Sunset Park. Really passionate about housing and land use issues in the neighborhood. And it's an honor to serve as chair. And I'll just go around to folks in the room and then we'll jump to people who are on the call. So I have.
And please make sure you speak closer to the mic so the people who are joining online can hear you.
Would you like us to use this or would this be better?
Probably use that one on the table first.
Do the folks who were here want to come up so they can also use this one. Also, whatever people want. Let me try this one. Is this better to the people on Zoom? Do the people on Zoom say, is this one better? This is microphone one. This is microphone two.
All right, some people are saying way better and about the same.
So I'll stay with this one for now. So John stands for neighborhood since 2016. I have lived in 4 apartments, Sunset Park, since 2016, and I'm a renter, and I live with roommates. So I will ask it to come up next. I grew up in the Bronx, by the way, and I think 2016 was the first time I came to Sunset. Pretty enamored with the park, and yeah. So if you want to.
Hi, I'm Dr. Tanisha Gonzalez. I was also born and raised in live in 4 out of the 5 boroughs, and I love Brooklyn with all my heart. I rent, and I'm not officially part of this committee, but I'm really passionate about that. Good evening, everyone. My name is Blessing Simone. I am born and raised in Brooklyn, and I do not live in Central Park, but I am an urban planning student at the moment, and I'm looking at Sunset Park for one of my current projects that I'm working on. And what I do have is to attend work. So here. Okay, so now we're going to move on to folks who joined via Zoom. Again, apologize in advance for any audio issues. If you can attend the next meeting in person, that would be ideal, but again, we're doing our best.
Please use the raise your hand function and you'll be called on. Harry Conti, please unmute yourself.
Hi, sorry I can't be there. I'm actually in Buffalo for work. I'm a director of a nonprofit, and I've lived in New York City pretty much my entire life, and Brooklyn most of it. And yeah, hi.
Harry Walker, please unmute yourself.
Hey folks, my name is Faye. I live in South Slope. I've lived here for about 4 years, and I'm a housing policy researcher in my day job. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you, Faye. That's recording participant online. That's what their hand raised.
No one else out there, have you? Okay, so thank you so much.
We have one more person. Damien, please unmute yourself.
Hey y'all. My name is Damien. I've been in the community for my whole life for 23 years. I guess I joined the housing committee because I'm very big on housing. For my day job, I am a community organizer on college campuses, organizing like the student body into the political process. But I'm here to support my neighbors, protect my community from unaffordable developments that are coming into Sunset Park. So we could have a community discussion on what housing we should have in the neighborhood and what housing we shouldn't have in the neighborhood.
Even if you're not officially a part of the committee, if you would like to introduce yourself, you're more than welcome. So just give a moment to see if anyone else would like to raise their hand. Okay. Well, again, thank you so much, everyone, for attending. For this meeting, really just wanted it to be a touch base and a planning meeting. Again, was hoping that folks would be in the room so we could sort of break up into groups. Um, we'll try to do some of that and also collaborate with folks who are on the line. But there's just so much going on in the neighborhood. Wanted to give folks an opportunity on the line and in the room to bring up any priorities that they feel the housing committee should touch on between now and December. So a few months ago, we did have a meeting where we talked about the St. Rocco's development. Um, that's being pushed forward. We don't have a date as to when the user will officially begin. But so that is ongoing. If that's an item that, you know, this committee would like to touch on more and talk about the aspect of housing, we can. But again, you know, I don't want to dictate what the agenda is going to be for the committee. So just want to open it up. And I know John has sent over, some items that were a priority to him. But if there's anyone else that would like to speak and just raise any concerns that you would like the housing committee to take up? Is there anyone with their hand raised online? Okay, anyone in the room who would like to?
I got her.
Priorities.
Oh my God, I'm in another space here. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Thank you. John, did you want to share some of the items that you have sent over to the committee?
Yeah,
Yeah, please come up front.
sure. Do you mind if I just?
Yeah.
No, they charge you extra. The bill comes in the mail.
Yeah. See, I just wanted to set of power. See. So here's a list of a few things that are priorities for me. I think my overall, what I value is people having quality, affordable housing neighborhood. That's what I personally need, and that's what I think I've heard from many community members in many different spaces, that housing has to be more affordable, and then also the quality of housing, many buildings are low and repairs are not made and people are living in bad conditions. I've heard less about home ownership, although I would love to learn more about that. Like, I feel like I've heard less people talking about the need for more people to have access to home ownership. But I feel like that's something that we could explore more. In terms of short-term things, I mean, the St. Rocco's rezoning proposal is really big. It's going to be the largest for our planning student. As far as I can tell, it's going to be the largest zoning proposal in CB7 in many years, because it is larger than the totem projects, at least 40 units larger than the totem projects, and it would be larger than the Our Linen project also. So I think it's critical that we focus on that. I do think the housing committee should work jointly with the land use committee. Obviously, when this goes to you, it's the land use committee that votes. But this is a housing proposal. It's a rezoning to create housing, you know, almost entirely. So I would support the committees working jointly to hold meetings. For me, the most important thing about that proposal is making sure that it's responsive to community needs, that it is contextual, meaning that people have a reasonable sense that it's not too big or too out of place. But also the critical thing for me is about the economics of that. I feel as though in the rezoning discussions that I've seen, 737 and this Arrow Linen are the ones that come to mind. We enter and exit. Well, I'll just speak for myself because I don't want to speak for others. I feel like I enter and exit those conversations without any understanding of the basic economics of these projects. In other words, developers come to the community, they say, here's our proposal. Do you like it? There's some discussion about whether or not people like it, and then the proposal either is or is not approved, or typically there seems to be some sort of what's referred to in the press or any coverage as a negotiation. The negotiation does not appear to be public. It is unclear to me what goes into the negotiation. Usually there's some change in the affordability of the units, but this is not, I'm not saying that this stuff is simple, but I also think it is treated kind of like a mystery. We don't know how much it costs to build these projects. We don't know if they could be reduced in cost, how you could change the design to change the cost involved, where financing could come from. I feel, and I'm going to limit myself to just like two more minutes because I don't want to talk too long, but just like, we're often told that developers will say, well, we would like to do more affordable, but we don't have the money, or the city would have to invest, but the city has not invested. That's sort of like where the conversation stops. There appears to be a lot of money for lots of projects and all sorts of things, and just off the top of mind, the city invested $57 million in South Brooklyn Green Terminal, $215 million in Brooklyn Army Terminal, 400 and close to $20 million in the Made in New York campus. Twice it increased the budget of the Made in New York campus building A and C, or maybe just building C. I have to double check, but increased by $97 million and then $98.7 million, two different times that budget was increased. When I've spoken to council members, and I have one council member on the record, Councilperson Avila's, the $98.7 million increase, she said she was never consulted, she was never aware of it, she never even knew it happened. It does not appear in any budget documents until months after the budget was passed. I'm trying to learn about this stuff, but there's money spent on tremendous numbers of things. I mean, the city has spent an enormous amount of money and continues to spend an enormous amount of money. So when a developer says, well, we would like to do more affordable housing, but we don't have the money, it seems like an obvious disconnect. So I think it's critical that this committee has the ability to produce a public record. The rezoning proposals are never going to stop in this neighborhood. The development is marching south. It's been marching south for years, building after building after building. Buildings are being knocked down, they're being redeveloped. They're either being redeveloped as of right, or there will be endless series of rezonings. It's never going to stop. If you live in this community for 30 or 40 years, unless there's some sort of large-scale economic contraction, in which case we all have bigger problems, developers will continue to attempt to rezone piece after piece after piece of the neighborhood. And I think it's critical for this committee to produce a public record of the economics of affordable housing creation so that everyone can clearly know in 2025, what does it take to build affordable housing? What are the inputs and what do you get out of those outputs? And I think we should ask those questions as directly as we can to, in the case of St. Rocco's, not just to Watermark Capital, which is, as the chair often points out, is building a 400, or at least is a major partner in a 400 plus unit, massive 28-story building on 62nd Street. So they have access to capital. And Fifth Avenue Committee, which engaged in private discussions with Watermark and with the Diocese St. Rocco's project. We need to get as much information, in my opinion, as possible so we really understand the economics. So I have a variety of other proposals, but a lot of them really have to do with the same basic topic, which is getting organizations in here that build and manage affordable projects and asking them to detail what they're seeing, what it takes to build, how much it costs, and where that money comes from. And then getting our elected officials as well. The previous chair, Marcelo Martinez, is the assembly person. What does she know about housing creation, housing maintenance? What is she seeing? The council person, Alexa Vilas, who's obviously going to be reelected very easily in a few weeks. What is she seeing? What does she know? It would be wonderful to get neighbors helping neighbors and other groups to talk about what they're seeing within buildings, like the quality of housing, whether buildings are getting neglected, whether people are being pressured to leave by by landlords. So those are some of the main topics. But I think like the St. Rocco's, to wrap it up, is a wonderful opportunity in my opinion to really try to produce a clear public record, which I don't think was produced with Arrow and wasn't produced with 737, to say, let's break it down. You're proposing this. How much does it cost you? What are the inputs? What do you get out of them? And can we discuss change? What would those changes cost? Where would the money come from? What design changes could be involved? And the more discussion we can have on questions like that, that is empowering, because that gives everybody access to information that they have forever going forward, and that can inform not just this particular rezoning, but every rezoning proposal that happens. And as far as I can tell, they're just going to keep happening. So thank you for the time.
Thank you, John. Just a comment on, I thank you for bringing all of that up, but just to share a quick comment, this board did pass a resolution asking for Watermark Capital to hold a public meeting with the diocese and the council member on St. Rocco's and the development that they're proposing. They did send a letter back addressing a number of the board's concerns that was not mentioned. They also did not respond to the board's request that we delay certification. So I hear you. There are a lot of concerns from the board, but then there is this issue of transparency. And even if we're inquiring on those questions, we actually get a response. And I think your remarks on economics of projects, I think, it is really important. If anyone on the line has any ideas of how this committee can move forward with, producing some sort of workshop or, how to move forward, with your ideas, especially if you have experience as urban planning student or in your day job around housing policy with
Here, could I just say one last quick thing? Sorry, Annette. Just on your point, I completely agree. We're often told, and Michelle, who's the Fifth Avenue Committee, has said, directly on at board meetings, we would like to get certain information from developers. They don't have to give it to us. They don't have to give it to us. So I get that, and I've heard people say, it would be nice to include this in a charter revision to try to mandate that as part of the UWare process, you have to provide information. But at the end of the day, there is no project without the council. There is no project without the mayor's approval. It doesn't happen because they don't have the zoning. There is one person, in the case of St. Rocco's, Alexa Aviles will either approve or disapprove this project. Pure and simple. If the council person says, no, I don't like it, the project simply does not happen. So the council person has enormous leverage, and the community has enormous leverage to the council person. I would also say that we're in a pretty fascinating moment in New York because the council person identifies as a democratic socialist, and she is elected twice now with the support of the Democratic Socialists of America. Presumably the next mayor is going to be a 34-year-old Democratic Socialist. This has never happened before in the history of modern New York City. Do these things mean anything? I'm not trying to be flippant. But yeah,
about the economic, or I just want.
Yeah, it's so in other words, like there's theoretically there's a philosophy that is changing, that is represented by the council person, that is represented by the incoming mayoral administration, or what I presume. They have an enormous amount of power and leverage. So even though a developer doesn't have to provide certain information, and you're right, they didn't initially respond to the chair's that, like there's no reason why they should expect that they can just ignore meaningful asks from a community and yet expect that they get a rezoning. Why should that be the relationships in the community? So I think we should ask our council person to be very strict on this and speak very clearly about how she understands the economics of this project, how it relates to her own political philosophy, her own relationship to land use, her own relationship to public spending. And then that would have to be the same project would have to be approved by the next mayor. So again, in a moment of extreme political flux right now, I think this community has an enormous amount of leverage to get any piece of information it wants from a developer that is proposing in this particular case, 3 new buildings just a few blocks from here.
Does anyone have anything to add to that in the room or online? Let me just see if anyone online has their hand raised. We're buffering.
I think one opportunity to use that function.
Okay. Would you like to come to us?
Yeah, so far nobody yet buffering, so take a couple of seconds.
Okay. So just in terms of working with our local legislators, maybe it makes sense to have a housing thing in their offices as opposed to waiting until it's further down down the line of communication and other meetings that we're not aware of, emails or third parties that we're communicating. Unrelated to all of that, I was just taking some notes. So on our block, we've had 2 fires that were related to the charging of batteries for electric bicycles. I don't think there's anything this committee can do in terms of regulating, battery usage and electric bicycles, but there is a piece around requirements for homeowners, especially when the units are not owner occupied. So both of those were not owner occupied, which I actually think is a big issue in our neighborhood. When I was growing up, the majority of the housing stock in the vicinity of the house that I lived in, the landlords lived in the buildings, and that made a difference even in terms of public safety response to calls, just the nature of how these things work, who's voting, etc. So if there's a way for us to figure out some kind of initiative for what's required for homeowners insurance, knowing that these fires are a huge problem. Co-ops, right? That building is still completely defunct. I have concerns every time I walk by it. The bricks are going to at some point come flying towards people. But that is also another example of a housing infrastructure or an organization of housing that didn't have enough insurance. At the core of their issues, they did not have enough insurance, and now there's a legal battle. And there is no end in sight to when that building is going to be rebuilt because of insurance. When I was little, I used to play hopscotch all the time. So I didn't realize that was preparing me to jump over rats as an adult. I've never seen so many rats as I see now. My son and I, we can't walk down the street and giant rats, like cats. They were caught by cars. That's how you know it's not your imagination. I know we're supposed to call 311. And there are issues with like pesticide use and that also spiking risk for the vulnerable in our population, children and older adults. But I think we have to figure out this rat issue. And I think it is actually part of housing / land use because the nests are connected to the houses. You could actually see them going into the basements of homes, the larger buildings especially. In terms of your question around home ownership, or John, you said that folks haven't necessarily. So CB7 sent out as part of the newsletter a workshop that you could attend for down payment assistance. Yeah. So I think this is kind of the way that these things are structured. Affordable housing, right, boxes people out. So you qualify based on your income, could you actually make that payment? For lots of folks, especially folks that are only living in Sunset Park because of rent stabilized, that's a huge jump. People aren't jumping into home ownership in the way that they used to 30 and 40 years ago. So there's an issue with the inflated appraisals. A building on my block that went for 210 when I was a kid is now going for $1.35 million. This is not something that anybody who's living in a rent stabilized unit can actually afford, even if they qualify for the maximum $150,000 that you could get for down payment assistance. So again, right, we're just kind of trapped in all of these policies that are supposed to be developed to help us. And I know that there's a really complicated formula for determining the affordable housing, but maybe as a pitch, we have to actually start advocating for low income housing because the affordable housing is not affordable. Now, I know that there are strong reactions to low-income housing, people have these not in my backyard, but the reality is that it's about the income that are required to qualify for. And then lastly, my son and I, we spend a lot of time in bush terminal. We used to, is not being intended to. And the way that this relates to housing, is that we can envision what's going to happen on First and Second Avenue in the next 20 years. And so again, my concern is that the development of that land, where the studio that's coming in, there's not going to be any consideration for, we're gonna call it, affordable housing, but really low income housing, which is really, working folks that qualify as like low, middle, upper low. And so again, if that, you ask for like priority areas for the committee, I think really figuring out how to be part of the plans for First and Second Avenue, which again, destitute areas. Nobody wanted to be on First and Second Avenue 30, 40 years ago. That's how we felt about Red Hook too. And now Red Hook is untouchable. You can't get a property in Red Hook for less than $2 million. So there's a lot of things for us to work on.
Thank you. Just a second. Is anyone, we're going to check if anyone has their hand raised. If you're attending virtually and would like to join the conversation, please raise your hand. No hands. Don't be shy. If anything comes up, please, we want to, make this as engaging as possible. I know, John, you had follow-up, but did want to get other folks in the room. Maria, did you want to?
Yes.
Sorry, leaving everyone.
I wasn't going to start with this, but when it comes to the affordability, the issue I'm going to talk about is the affordability, the ability to have owner occupied. There is some conversation at the state level, but it's just a conversation about preventing purchases of 1 to 3 family houses by LLCs or by any private equity entity. And usually in these neighborhoods, the people who step up from a rental or even a co-op into a house is either 1 to 3 families, which is residential. Once it becomes 4, it is 4 and above is commercial properties. So I think that's huge because the more money that private equity, which has very, very deep pockets, is able to offer to buy this property, that raises the value for everybody else. And on top of that, what we get is this dug out basements to create an extra floor or have it on top of a beautiful brownstone and all kinds of other shenanigans so that nobody's there on a day-to-day basis being accountable for that property. So that's one thing that you spoke about, so I decided to start with that. In reference to, I think we need to ask because I think we are hampered at CB7 when we don't have enough money to hire a consultant. If we get lucky that we have someone on the board that is an expert, has expert experience in either housing or land use or any of that. But we need someone who doesn't can come into CB7 and work for the entire neighborhood, not work for anyone, not work for the board itself, but work for the community. And I think we need to ask our city and state electeds for funding for housing and land use consultants. And we have been, we have talked about that here, but nothing seems to be, there haven't been any positive results to that. Whether it is a fundraising, what I think there should be city and state money, to forget the federal government, at this point, forget, our representative. We're not gonna get any money from those folks. But city and state, and, particularly when, and I agree with, some party over here, that we may be, we look like we are, poised for a more positive response to affordable housing, the affordable housing, nobody's called affordable housing space. And, saving this community from climate crisis, from not allowing anyone to build any more housing west of Third Avenue, that should be prohibited, period. And that land should be used to protect what is there and protect the upland, no more. And in fact, help those who own property down there that cannot afford to come up upland. And those land swaps, which I've spoken about, and they're done elsewhere, from businesses that have no business being next to residential housing up here because they are toxic. And offer land down there where they can build and bring a residential, people up here, and that can be done by government. That can be done by government. We negotiate this, it's not gonna be done overnight, but if we had started that, oh my goodness, I've been speaking about this for 10 years. We could have been way, into a program that could see who wanted, not wanted, because we know the water is coming. There's no more argument about it. There's not because I think so, the science is saying. So no one, we should be building hotels west of Third. How are you going to evacuate people? Look at Redwood when, Sandy came. The hospital even shouldn't be down there. That was put there. I don't know who knew in this community that was the plan to move, the hospital when it was moved, because there was no conversation, climate crisis or climate, anything at that time. But, how do we evacuate people out of hospitals? How do we evacuate out of their homes? This is a different reason. This is you can get people, it's coming out, you get them out and you stop the supply and you get the buses out of here, to get people out. But I'm like, I'm going off on a tangent here. What is the tax, something that I'm not clear about, because again, we don't have any, that I know of, someone who is a tax consultant or knows taxes, real estate taxes in particular. What are the tax responsibilities for the Brooklyn diocese going forward in the, leasehold development of St. Robert's? Because they're not selling the land to St. Robert's. They are leasing the land to St. Robert's. So how do they benefit? Do they no longer, they still not have to pay real estate taxes because they haven't paid taxes on that land for as long as they had control of that land? So are they getting a benefit? But for the church, I don't have the answers, but I think they have to be transparent about that. And that is the benefit that they're getting all this money, but they don't have to pay taxes, or they pay reduced taxes lower than a property owner. We should know that, because that money, that savings should go to building more affordable housing on that block. Let's see. You talked about no developer that divulging their numbers, the economics of their. I think they don't either on their projects. And a lot of them, where are the performance? What is the budget, the final budget from nonprofit developers who get benefits from city, state, and federal money? They have not, oh no, those are private numbers. If you're using our tax monies for anything, even $1, you're no longer private. And a nonprofit is what it is, nonprofit. And so why are they not bound to divulge their performance, their numbers on their pro? Who's renting those apartments? How many people from the neighborhood? Once they are open for rental, how many people from outside? That the taxpayers have a right to oversee the operations of that. And if not, HPD should open the books. Because if that's what they say, well, we are reporting to HPD and whoever else in the government, let them, they report to us. And the city council needs to ask us, and the state legislature. And the last thing I want to mention is that, has there been any conversation, or it's a question, has there been any conversation at the community board to hold any information meetings on the ballot, questions, referring to city of yes and referring to all this, giving more power to the mayor, whether it is the present mayor or the future mayor, or can we do that as a committee? That since those questions that deal directly with housing and deal directly with land use. I think the land use committee and the housing committee can, and for use right for you, arrange for an information session on what the consequences of the result of voting yes or voting no.
Right, so there is a meeting that is scheduled, that's gonna be hosted by Larry in October. I don't have to be on top.
October 20th.
Fine.
Yeah, so then, early voting will already be in running. So anyone who goes between, let's say someone who was planning to come. So, because early voting starts the 24th of October or 26th of October. It's 9 days before the election. Yeah. So, if there's any chance, I don't know, can we do something to make it an earlier, a meeting that takes place prior to early voting? So that people, at least more people going there, with that information and that awareness.
The land use committee meeting is scheduled for, the land use for October 20th.
Okay, so
That's
okay,
prior to,
I thought I heard 20.
no, October 20th. Monday, October 20th.
Thank you.
At 6:30.
Okay, so we need to get the word out and I'm gonna put that on your middle. But early on, to get it out, we have a responsibility individually to amplify that to the community, to the community.
District office will word in various forms.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. And then we have two folks on the line. Yeah.
Andrade, can you please unmute yourself?
Yeah, like definitely to echo Maria, definitely want to circle back on like how would I guess a scenario like with the ballot questions do approve, like how much power would theoretically the community board lose in that? And like, to echo it, we definitely should be talking about the ballot questions. And I guess after that question, I guess thing, I'm definitely hearing a lot of great conversations, economic wise, how much money is it to build affordable housing, what is the price point? And I know the previous speaker before Maria was talking about like money in Red Hook and how building just by building is really expensive. Sorry, it's loud. I don't know if this is something that the community board could like, I know, set a resolution in support of when the legislative session is happening. But I thought a really cool concept when we were talking about affordable housing and like, how everyone says, quote unquote, it's too expensive. Where's the money? Me personally, I believe that the city does have the money. They just don't want to invest that money in the proper way. But we should definitely look at like public banking. I think I have mentioned this like a while ago when I was on the board, but public banking will be definitely something that the board should look at, in supporting and educating, the public on, in the terms that if New York City were to divest our tax dollars away from the big banking industry, not saying, get rid of the private bank industry, but to hold our city's funds in a public bank, and a public bank would be able to invest in our communities, especially what Maria's saying, invest in our waterfront communities to build climate resilience, building sea walls. Like, where's the money going to go? Instead of holding our tax dollars, because obviously the private bank market, what they're doing with our tax dollars is investing in unaffordable housing, investing in fossil fuel industry, investing in basically making themselves richer with our tax dollars, when we could use our tax dollars to build community-based housing. Another side note that we could also look at North Dakota. North Dakota is also a prime example. They're actually the first state in the nation to have a public bank, and they actually had a public bank before the recession. And North Dakotians were actually weren't suffering that much during the recession in like what, 07, 08, due to the fact that they had a public bank. And then people who had homes and stuff like that, they were able to borrow money from the public bank in order to stop their homes from being foreclosed, small businesses from going out of the stuff like that. But yeah, just to bring it up, public banking could be something as a tool, and also TOPA, Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. If those two bills were to pass, I feel like affordable housing, real affordable housing that working class people could afford, could be a reality and stuff like that. I guess that's like my one take in this whole thing.
Thank you so much for bringing those up, Damien. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Elise, is time you can speak. If you want to go.
Okay. I don't. Sure. Thoughts on my mind. I don't know about you, but
So, the only pathway, for the groups that I talked about earlier, this uh, to home ownership are HDFCs, and they're available in other neighborhoods. So, like folks who fall into out of affordable housing, they would have to leave the neighborhood, and that's not a choice that we should be pushing on anybody. But I don't know. So my question is, why are there no HDFCs here? Like, I don't understand. I can tell. Yeah, great. Thank you.
And if you could just up my. Okay. An HDFC is a housing development corporation. Which is different from a private co-op, or which is, a commercial. It's an incorporation on a different level. HDFCs were made, possible as an Article 11, the state passed legislation and created through, the HDR, the department. It has changed what it means. The Department of Community and Housing, Community and Economic, what is it called? DHCR. Community and Development, Housing and Community. What, it means something. They changed what the acronym stands for. So I'm going back when I dealt with this, was DHCR. That's it. So the reason we don't have them here is that this community, even though it's always for, especially in the 60s, 70s, experienced some burnouts like on 6th Avenue. It wasn't the mass abandonment of properties as they were in the Bronx and Harlem, in Upper Manhattan. And that's where you see the majority of the HDFCs. You don't see too many in Queens. There's 2 or 3, maybe a dozen or less. Let's put it at that. And certainly not in other neighborhoods. But in this neighborhood, the visual and the most loss of low-income housing was on 6th Avenue. And what the landlords did, they just picked somebody to burn it down. So there was, and the government stepped in, because there was a program that stepped in, to then rebuild those buildings and make the units of, make them, what do they call them? Section 8 developments. And provide affordable housing through, Section 8 voucher. Other than that, we didn't have the abandonment, the house, because we had a lot of, 1 and 3 family owner occupied. And even, and by that point in the 1970s, we didn't have, the rents were still affordable. So people were able to pay their rent and not fall behind and not have a landlord then have to, resort to abandoning the building because they couldn't keep the building up. And that's the reality that we have to. We can talk about, so that answers your question a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can talk about more, because I developed, low income colas for many years through, when the federal government was still putting money into the process. And what stopped the development of HDFCs, the rental and the purchase ones, was when the federal government walked away. And we can thank Reagan, President Reagan, for that. That was the beginning of the, and so there's a lot of history and it's valid, but that's history. We know what happened. And the government, the city of New York or the state, never owned up to the fact that the federal government is out. What are we going to do? Where's the taxes that I pay here? What are the tax rules here? We haven't been taken care of by our elected officials for decades and decades and decades. And we cannot blame that it was one party versus the other. Everybody's.
Thank you, Maria. I did want to circle back to a comment from Elise. Elise, did you want to unmute and share your comment with the group? You should now be able to unmute.
Okay. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I apologize for joining late. I recall a recent meeting at which, I forget which project it was, but Michelle Delauz had mentioned that the city charter does not require this, the current iteration of the city charter does not require that housing developers provide their financials for any projects. So I remember her saying that, and I was thinking that maybe it would be helpful for the housing committee to propose some kind of resolution that would mandate or require that any organization that's seeking to develop housing in the district be required to declare all their financials associated with the project before any kind of EULA process happens or any kind of discussion happens about the project, so that if it's a nonprofit organization, a church, a for-profit developer, any institution that's seeking to develop housing, that they're legally mandated to disclose all their financials so that we know what their financials are for their projects. That's it.
Thank you so much, Elise. We don't have quorum in the room to pass such, but that's something that we can definitely consider moving forward. Anyone else on the line has anything that they'd like to add? All right, well.
I'm just gonna follow up on.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah, at least, this is Jeremy. I think that's a really good idea. I wonder if the best way to go about it might be to also work with the council member's office on something where, because I think we should follow up from the plan that she set up, that she's talked about, like her housing plan that she created with members of the community and have some sort of teeth to that because it's tough for us as a community board to enforce anything. But if the council member says, this is my, this is how I operate, and I wanna operate with a lot of transparency, and I want to see financials, and I know they're going to say, well, oh, we can't do that. The deal hasn't been done yet, or we can't do that before things. But I think that in general, it would just be the working with the council members to sort of develop some sort of policy around that in conjunction with the community board and the housing committee and land use committee, I think would be the most effective way. That I don't think we're going to get all of their financials, but if we start to get some semblance of sort of what the parameters that they're looking at. Because I think one example that's really insightful was the conversation about Arrow Linen and that rezoning and sort of the possibility of what that nonprofit was, nonprofit potential, and hearing from some people who knew about the proposal saying that the nonprofit developer who was interested in Arrow Linen said that, if they had a max height of 8 or 9 stories, they could offer a reasonable 100% affordable proposal. And so that was just me hearing from hearsay from people who had seen it. I didn't get, the exact information, but it gave a much better, if that was true, it gave a much better idea for us as the board as to what is truly possible. And so they, could be able to break down how that's the case. And part of it was that they were saying to put a package together to buy the land that at 8 or 9 stories, they could do 100% affordable, but then a developer who could go way above that could offer way more for the value of the land and make way more back if they're building 13 or 15 stories. And so that's what they were saying, was that the nonprofit developer could not be, quote, competitive with the for-profit developer at a much higher height, because they obviously can be willing to offer more for the land because they're going to make a much higher return. So yeah, I think that example is really helpful, because as a board, we could sit there and say, well, we can weigh these sort of things if we have some information like that. And so I think it would be good to partner, figure out a way to go back to Alexa's office and be like, we want to see more teeth in the land use principles, and especially around financials and around what is disclosed, because she has some wording about that, but I don't think so far we haven't seen really any of it bear fruit in the rezonings that we've seen so far. We haven't got more transparency from from developers, and we've got the same amount of information that we've usually had. So I think it's worthwhile to see how we can work with the council member to make that better.
Thank you, Jeremy. Maria? Just quickly, I think it needs to be a charter or a future charter revision, which in retrospect, a few days ago I was thinking, and I'm guilty of the same. I'm not even bringing up that conversation in this setting, because we don't have the power to demand a charter revision. That's the council, and that is one of the things now that is going to be, depending on how the voting goes, that it needs to be in writing. It needs to be enforceable. Somebody can sue, take it to court, that if the city of New York, including the controller, because it's money. What is the money? Where is the money? Where is our money? And why is it coming back to us? What was talked about of having, I think it was someone said something about setting us, the public bank idea, that there's money set aside for this purpose. We know there's a need. And so those conversations, I think we need to be more forceful with our own elected officials, that we want action. The talking we've been talking about all of this forever and ever and ever. But I think so that there's caucuses in the city council that speak to being there for the purposes of working for the working class and the middle class. But I don't know if anyone else, but I'm not seeing like concrete change, especially in housing and land use. I haven't seen concrete steps moving forward, and that has to be put into law. It has to be put in the charter, and we need to start working now or the day after the election to bring the parties together and put in charter revisions that demand that a nonprofit in particular. I'm not even going to go as far as a private developer for nonprofit developers and for any private developer that receives any additional space or whatever, or needs to open up the books. That's, then why we're partners, and as partners, we're not being, nobody's reporting to us. But if you're using public money and you're not paying taxes, like the Catholic diocese, all these years, where's the accountability? I don't know. I don't understand. Anyone else in the room wants to add to the conversation? So, I don't know, I'm gonna throw a question back. I mean, all of this is very heavy. It's a lot to tackle. Um, I'm sort of thinking, do we as a committee want to come together and have sort of our own principles that we can pitch, to outside, whether that be elected or what have you, but should we aim to do that, come together? Because there's just so many things, and to be honest with you, there's a lot here that I'm not an expert on, but I really appreciate everyone just jumping in and us being able to learn from each other. But maybe that's the next step. I understand that Councilmember Vilas has a number of land use principles, so maybe that is something that we can come together as a committee and then meet with the broader committee or with the council member to see what moves forward from there. Does that sound, do folks agree with that? And then there were also, just wanted to go back, there was a lot of conversation around bringing in consultants, talking about homeownership, insurance, tax consultants, getting to the meat of economics around projects. So just trying to formulate, what's the next step around that? Or like what kind of meeting we can have or convening or workshop where we can get more information. Jeremy?
Yeah, I was going to mention with in regards to the consultants and education around educating the committee and also the community in various details around it. When they passed the City of Yes, one of the big things that Alexa and sort of the full progressives fought for was all this additional funding for housing. And part of the funding that was in there was actually around education for planning and consulting and things like that. So I think that is something that we should go back to Alexa and say, I can't remember the number, but that we'd like to see, how is that divvied up? And we'd like to see that applied here. And, we're trying to work out our principles and what we'd like to see in the community, but also, that this kind of broad community education, they fought for funding for that. So it should be there. I can't remember the exact number, but I mean, this was part of the deal that Alexa made and that she drove for. So we should see that money coming, especially here in our district. And that's a reason why people ended up voting for the city of yes, despite having a lot of disagreements with various other parts of it. So yeah, I think that we need to, make sure we see that funding come here and it becomes applicable. And also, maybe it becomes something that it helps to establish that it's not just we hire a consultant, but it's educating people in the community who can then come out and do, outreach and education throughout. So it's not just like, one person holds all this knowledge but that we actually sort of educate all of ourselves, and then we have more outreach that goes out to the community. And so there's more sort of events around that. Because I know sometimes some of the educational stuff around land use becomes so arcane and so complicated that it turns off a lot of people. And people are like, I don't understand this. This is thousands of pages of laws. So I think it's important to us to think about how we translate that into things that are accessible to a lot of people who get more people engaged in the issue when it means like what your community looks like. A lot of times I think the expert consultants kind of make it so complicated that people feel like I can't like access this information or I don't want to because it sounds ridiculous. And it does sometimes when all the acronyms and everything else. But yeah, so I think that's a thing to consider is how we make it more accessible. And then again, how we talk with Alexa or someone in our office about where's the funding that came from the city of yes and how we can use that for the community education.
Thank you, Jeremy. Not to put Blessing on the spot, but would love to hear from you if you have any thoughts on how, we as a committee could make these conversations more digestible to folks, just being that, my understanding is currently the student, I mean, that's pretty anything to share, but would love to tap your brain. It is something that we struggle with. A lot of these topics go over our head. But if you have any idea of any resources that we can tap into.
I don't have the most experience since I am second year, but I can tell in my personal experience that I'm personally a native New Yorker, I speak the way I speak and I talk things the way I understand them. But then I'm also in these academic spaces where things can get very jargony, very archaic. And I'm meant to understand these things. I'm sure I can. But it also just comes down to, in my personal experience, to write papers for other people to read or make presentations for other people to understand these topics I'm trying to say. Is more so just understand it from a person to person point of view. Obviously, I can't come to somebody like, do you understand what soil erosion is or something like that? Be like, okay, this is what this is. It leads to this, that. This is how it impacts you. Just nature, like just breaking it down in a way that you would understand something if you weren't a mastermind. That's how big. That's the best. It's very basic, but it's the best way that I can put things, and it's the best thing that's worked for me this far. So,
Thank you, Blessing. Thank you. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up the notes. I know we touched on so much. Let's schedule a meeting in 2 weeks. Let's come together. Folks on the line, thank you so much for joining virtually. But would love to have you all here in the room in person. Let's try to make this interactive. And really just try to come together. We do have an outline of what our principles can be as a housing committee, but let's try to open this up, get more voices in the room. And what we can do is, have paper on the wall, try to bring, you are all here tonight, try to tap into someone bring them into the room and let's try to outline, make a goal of 10 principles that we can follow. And then at the end of the meeting, we'll decide our next step on what we want to do there with those principles. Maria?
I'm just saying, a 1960s teaching.
I need you to speak into the mic. Always people on Zoom can hear you.
Something I don't know. When you were speaking, I thought it makes me think of old school, sorry about that, but that's how people learn so much about civil rights and all that because there were these teachings they were called, that is the old school word for it, that people came and realizing that it was a serious issue to the community and to the country, that whatever you knew, you shared. And we seem to have gotten away from that in this country. That is more the expert. You have to go to the expert. All of us are expert in one thing or another. We may not know it. And sometimes people are shy or say, oh, I don't know nobody. If you have lived a situation, you're an expert in that situation. You were a victim. How you were a victim. What did they do to you? You're an expert from the consumer side of things. And so you don't have to be a lawyer, you don't have to be an architect, you don't have to be an engineer, but everybody has, and yes, you want to tell them the experts in the room, providing they have a community mindset. Because someone may know the law very well, but if they don't understand the law as it applies and it affects individuals in a community, you're not going to get much from that person. What you need is someone, first of all, who knows how to teach, because normally somebody doesn't know how to share it. And so we're a university town with universities that have colleges of architecture, of land use, of all this. Where are these people in New York City? They used to come out and participate in the 70s and the 80s. They were involved with the nonprofits directly. And that's how you had the studios, you had the activity. The students were learning from practice by going into communities and seeing how what they were learning affected the community. We see some of it, but we're not seeing it all. And they get tax breaks too.
Thank you, Maria. Okay, so that's our next big convening. I'll try to bring snacks for us. Just wanted to make sure. So we started tonight's meeting at 6. For the next meeting, just by a show of hands, should we start a little later at 6:30 with that work better people
Today.
Yeah.
I apologize.
No problem. So the next meeting, we'll try to aim for about 2 weeks and promise we'll start this year. So thank you again, everyone, for joining. I'm really looking forward to our next meeting and all our future meetings together. Thank you.